that I do not understand, we're not able to utilize my computer, which we've done many times in the past, so I have no idea what happened. So we had to download the file. It's on Kayla's computer, and I can't see the picture on the computer, so you'll have to bear with me if I get things confused. Last time we ended up on the Mount of Olives, looking over Old Jerusalem, and you can see, the Dome of the Rock that is built there on the Temple Mount. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of what's happening in the Middle East these days. That's not going to fly. And I'm going to try and give a presentation based on the experiences that Dale and I had when we traveled to Israel and also the Palestinian territories about 10 or so years ago. We were a little concerned about going over there at that particular time, but everything seemed quiet. And I spoke to a friend of mine, a cardiologist here in Memphis who's Jewish, and I asked him what he felt about traveling to Israel at this point in time. And he said he felt safer in Israel than he did in North Memphis. So that helped persuade Dale that yes, we could go. So this is what we ended up last time, and just a little zooming on the Dome of the Rock. The area around the Dome of the Rock, the courtyard is closed. We were not able to go in there to get any closer than we wanted to. Now also last time, when I'm calling part one, just to review for you, we traveled initially to Jordan, and particular focus was on Petra, the Rose City. And also we looked at the treasury. We also covered a lot of other areas, including the Golden Heights, the Sea of Galilee, and as I said, we ended up in Jerusalem. This is a treasury, if you recall from last time. This is where Indiana Jones, not a relative of mine, by the way, when in Raiders of the Lost Ark, he came galloping out of the treasury on his horse and went all the way down what's known as the Seek. What I'm going to talk about today, I spent a little more time in Jerusalem, talk about the Western Wall, the Via Dolorosa, looking at in Getty Nature Park, Qumran Caves, Masada, the Dead Sea, and finally into Palestinian Authority territory. And then we ended up having lunch in the Judean desert with a sheikh and his rather large family. Very large family, as you'll see. All right, just to put you in perspective as to where we have been in this journey, we spent time Tel Aviv, Caesarea, up to the Golden Heights, the Valley of the Tears, Sea of Galilee. We saw the Jordan River coming out of the Lebanon into the Sea of Galilee, and then heading down towards the Dead Sea. We were in Jericho, we were on the Mount. Today we're going to look at Masada a little bit, and also into Jerusalem and Bethlehem, which is in the Palestinian Authority territories. So that's just to put it in context. Now this shows a depiction of the old city of Jerusalem. And the old city of Jerusalem has 4 different sections. You've got the Armenian quarter, the Christian quarter, the Jewish quarter, and the Muslim quarter. And there is a total of, 8 gates? Yeah, 8 gates leading through the wall in the old city. 2 of these gates, the Lion's Gate and the Golden Gate, are closed, but there are the other gates here and we'll look at the Zion Gate in just a minute, and also the Dung Gate is when we entered into the old city. So that just gives you a sense of what the old city looks like. Now, this is walking towards the old city wall of Jerusalem. Along this path here, this is the city wall of Jerusalem that you can see there. Now, we came to the Zion, went up to the Zion Gate. And as you look at the Zion Gate, you can see this gate here. All these marks, what are known as pock marks. Does anyone have any idea what caused all of these marks in the stone? Someone said bullets. Under what circumstance? This was in the War of Independence in 1948. And that's when the Zion Gate at that point came under the jurisdiction of Jordan. Subsequently, I think it was the Yom Kippur War in 1967, if I've got the date right, Israel reclaimed this area. But this is a reflection of all the bullet holes from the War of Independence. Now, we entered the old city, we went through the Dung Gate, and in order to get into the old city, there was a security check, and we were thoroughly searched in terms of what we might have been taking or not taking into the old city. We went into the plaza, the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall. There's this area here, the plaza. And the Wailing Wall there is divided into two parts. There is the men's side, and of course this wall here is just part of the Western Wall. It's much more extensive than that, which we'll try and see in just a few minutes. And here is the men's side, and the men praying at the Wailing Wall. To the right is the women's side, which I did not go into for obvious reasons. We also had the opportunity to go into some of the areas of Old Jerusalem and where they're doing excavations. And this shows an excavation of a Roman street, and also here a Roman road. So they're doing extensive excavations in the old city, underneath the old city is what it boils down to. Now I want to talk about the Via Dolorosa, also known as the Way of Suffering. This is a processional route in the old city, which is believed to be the path that Jesus walked with the cross. And we'll start off at the Chapel of Flagellation. There are a total of nine stations. That's the word I'm trying to think of. There are a total of 9 stations. Before, after following the lines here, and it's not a direct route, we end up at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which has 5 stations. It's an uphill route, as we'll see in a little bit. It covers about 2,000 feet, as I recall, and we walked the whole of the route when we were there. The first is Chapel of Flagellation, where Jesus is condemned to death. This is the first station. The second station is the Chapel of the Condemnation, where Jesus receives the cross. Station 3 is where Jesus falls under the cross for the first time. Station 4 is where Jesus meets his mother, Mary. Station 5 is where the cross is taken over by Simon of Cyrene. Station 6 and Station 7. Station 6, Veronica wipes the sweat from Jesus' face. Station 7 is where Jesus falls for the second time. Station 8, this is where Jesus consoles the woman of Jerusalem. Station 9 is where Jesus falls for the third time. Now we come to the main entrance of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And this is where 5 of the stations are located inside this church. And this is showing some tombs from the time of Jesus. Inside the church are these 5 stations. Station 10 is where Jesus is stripped of his garments. Station 11 is where Jesus is nailed to the cross. Station 12, where Jesus dies on the cross. Station 13, where Jesus' body is taken off the cross. And lastly, Station 14, where Jesus' body is laid into the sepulchre. The church sits on top of Golgotha or Calvary, and it's an uphill climb to get up there to Golgotha. And we walked up there. We obviously had an Israeli guide with us who was able to explain lots of things that otherwise we would not have known what we were even seeing. Now, there are some historical models here. Historical models of the Temple Mount. The hill, the temple was leveled by who leveled it? Was it Herod? I think it was Herod, wasn't it?
No, the first one would have to be
Solomon. Okay, you're right. Historical model of the Temple Mount. And this shows you on the Temple Mount, you've got the western wall, much more extensive than what we saw earlier. The Temple Mount, and here is Herod's temple. The Dome of the Rock is sitting on top of the Temple Mount. And again, the Western Wall, and here is a depiction of the old city of Jerusalem. Here's a model in the Jerusalem Museum of Herod's temple. And here is a model of Jerusalem in the Israeli Museum of a model of Jerusalem around about 70 AD. We also traveled by and visited Herodian National Park. Just shows you some of the ruins there in this park. And also, this is where King Herod's tomb is. King Herod's tomb was found not too long ago. I'm trying to remember exactly. 2007, you're right, yeah. Thank you, Doug. King Herod's tomb was found in 2007 and is in the process of being excavated. Right in here. Then we also went by a nature reserve in Getty Nature Reserve Park. This was one of the sites which was an oasis and where there was plenty of water. And this is where David was able to hide his men from King Saul. In Getty Nature Reserve. N-E-I-N means spring, and Getty, if you're not aware of it, means goat kid. So reality is, En Gedi is literally spring of the kid or young goat. There are 3 waterfalls there: David's Fall, the largest, the middle falls, and the lower falls. And there was water constantly flowing out of these in this particular area, this oasis. Then we went to the Omron Caves, and this is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in the 1940s or thereabouts, as I recall. And they were found, as you may remember the story, a young shepherd boy was throwing rocks into these caves, and here is the cave here in which he was throwing rocks, and when the rocks were thrown in, you could hear things breaking. And with further exploration, they found clay pots. These are replicas of clay pots that were in the Omron Caves. And this is a clay pot that held some of the Dead Sea Scrolls. They have found the Dead Sea Scrolls in many different areas. Some new ones have been found relatively recently, and they are depicted in one of the museums we were able to go to. Here is some Dead Sea Scrolls which are on pieces of leather, and obviously protected from the environment. And here's a copper scroll from about 100 AD. We also went to an area where the Essenes, which were a Jewish sect, and some archaeologists thought that the Essenes may have been the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but there's no real historical evidence that the Essenes were authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Shows a communal bath for ritual bathing, a cistern, which would hold water, obviously, and there's the ruins of a communal dining room. Masada. Masada is a rock plateau, isolated. It overlooks the Dead Sea, and it's a site where Herod the Great built a fortified palace in about 37 or 31 AD as a refuge from his enemies. After his death and subsequent annexation of Judea by the Romans stationed a garrison at Masada. When the Jewish freedom fighters revolted against the Romans in around about 66 AD, Masada became the last bastion for them. The Romans laid siege to Masada at the end of the Jewish-Roman War, and there were about 960 Jewish rebels who were hiding there, and they chose to commit mass suicide rather than submit to the Romans and become slaves. There is no archaeological evidence that the defenders of Masada actually committed mass suicide. There were 2 women and 5 children who hid in one of the cisterns and survived, but there's no, as I said, there's no archaeological evidence that they committed mass suicide. This gives you an aerial view of Masada on top of the plateau. And here's a 3D model of the original Masada. It's interesting, you can stand at the top here and look down on these successive levels. Here we're looking at the top, looking down. Here is the ruins of a Roman encampment when the Romans had Masada under siege. And here is a ramp that was built by Jewish slaves leading up to the top of Masada. Here is on the top of Masada. That's it. All right, now let's go to the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is very salty. It's 8.6 times more saltier than the ocean. And it's certainly one of the deepest hypersaline lakes in the world. It is 1,300, almost 1,400 feet below sea level, so it's extremely low. And if you go swimming, before I get to that, let me just remind you of where the Dead Sea is, location of the Dead Sea. The Jordan River emanates in Lebanon, some of the mountains here in Lebanon, flows into the Sea of Galilee, and then continues down the West Bank, Palestinian territory, and the Israel here, and Jordan is here, and it flows all the way from the Sea of Galilee into the Dead Sea, and that's basically where it stops. With evaporation of water, the Dead Sea seems to be declining, it seems to be shrinking, and who knows what it will be like in a few years from now. And here we are swimming in the Dead Sea, or should I say floating in the Dead Sea. It was very difficult there to try and stand up, because if you're trying to put your feet down to stand up, they'd float up again. So you really had to turn around, put your hands down, it wasn't that deep, and push up, and that way you could stand up. But very much saline. Now, that concludes what I'm going to say about our experiences and our trip into Jerusalem and into the other areas of Israel. Now, I want to take us into the Palestinian territories. Now, after we'd been in the Dead Sea, we went back to Tel Aviv and spent a night in a hotel in Tel Aviv. And then we drove into the Palestinian territories. Now, when we left the hotel, we had an Israeli bus driver, but we had to stop before we could go into the Palestinian territories. We had to stop there and exchange the Israeli driver for a Palestinian driver, because the Israeli could not drive the bus into the Palestinian Authority territory. So we needed to get a Palestinian, which we did. Nice fellow, by the way. So now we're entering Palestinian Authority territory. And you may not be able to read that, so I've blown it up a little bit. This is a Palestinian Authority territory. No entry for Israelis. Entry is illegal by Israeli law. Israelis cannot go into the Palestinian Authority territory. We went by, this is an Israeli checkpoint, and we had the Israeli soldiers standing there. They were willing to have their photographs taken. I obviously asked for permission. I didn't want them aiming their gun at me for whatever reason. And just a few examples of places we visited in the Palestinian Authority territory. This shows the city of Nablus on Mount Gerizim. Mount Gerizim is in the background. And we went by St. Fortunini Church, which is a Greek Orthodox church in Nablus, and this is where Jacob's well is thought to be located. Well, we were not allowed to take a photograph of what is purported to be Joseph's well, so we had to take a photograph of a replica of Joseph's well, which was close enough. And we went by Jericho. This is an archaeological dig in Jericho. Jericho is believed to be one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world, and the archaeologists have unearthed remains of about 20 successive settlements in Jericho, the first of which dates back about 11,000 years. So it's one of the oldest cities, oldest inhabited cities in the world. And there's just some more archaeological digs showing the different levels, different areas of Jericho. Ruins of Ahab's palace, old watchtower, Franciscan chapel on Shepherd's Field, inside the chapel. It also went by Manger Square in Bethlehem. And this shows the Church of the Nativity at Bethlehem. We attempted to go inside, but there was literally the entire population of Palestine plus a whole bunch of tourists in there. It was shoulder-to-shoulder people, and you were jostling here, there, and everywhere. So, and frankly, it was not a very good experience. I'm exaggerating to say how many people were there, but it was really, really crowded. So we were not able to explore that as much as we would have liked. And that shows the the entrance to the Church of Nativity. We did try and go in, but we didn't last there very long. We went to Hebron, and this was fairly early in the morning, and you may not be able to see it clearly enough, but there is wire netting over the top of this market here, and the Israelis in their houses would be throwing rubbish and trash onto the people walking by. So we're in this market in Hebron, and we hear this stamping, marching of feet. And it turned out it was a squad of 6 Israeli soldiers, a couple of females, if I recall. I think there were a couple of females, just marching. They were on patrol through Hebron. And here we are walking along one of the streets of Hebron, heading in the direction of the Cave of the Patriarchs. The Cave of the Patriarchs, after one of the Israeli wars, and you remember which one? Yeah, well, the Israelis, I'm not sure what it was now, they had the Cave of the Patriarchs. They have the mosque side, and as we'll see in a minute, the synagogue side. The mosque side includes Abraham's tomb, Isaac's tomb, and Jacob's tomb is on the synagogue side of the Cave of the Patriarchs, and Joseph's tomb as well. Now this shows you the Judean desert. It's obviously very much a desert, but there is some animal life there. I think we can see goats, and mostly goats, I believe. Now we ended up with visiting a Bedouin sheik and his family, and they provided lunch for us. Now, usually the Bedouins, which are sort of nomad people, they would pack up their tent and travel to different parts, different areas, following water. They needed to have a supply, a source of water. Well, times have changed. Now, water comes to them. They have a water truck, so they don't have to pack up and move like they did in times gone by. It just shows you the water truck parked outside. Now here is the sheik. Gentleman was, how old would you say he was? In his 70s or 80s? Hard to tell. Very hard to tell. Very kindly gentleman, very nice gentleman, very hospitable. And here is some of his family. I don't remember, do you remember how many children he had? I don't remember. He had a lot of children. He had a lot of grandchildren. And he had a lot of great-grandchildren. He had a large family. As you can see, I haven't bothered to count up the number of people there. And here he is. Little kids just the world over. And here we are actually now, of course, when you're eating lunch, you're not sitting at tables with chairs, you're sitting on the carpet, the mat, on the floor. And you can presumably recognize Dale in the background. Here is our bus driver, Palestinian bus driver, and here is our Palestinian guide. In fact, we were very fortunate. We were driving along one day, and the Palestinian bus driver stopped the bus, went into a house, and he went in to check with his wife to see if it would be okay to bring this group of American tourists in. And we went inside this house, and they provided us with tea and something to nibble on, I believe. And it was very nice. So then, we'll come back to that. So then we were getting ready. We were staying in Bethlehem, I think it was, a hotel in Bethlehem. We were getting to leave Palestinian territories to go back to Ben Gurion Airport to head home again. Well, to get from Bethlehem to the airport, I think we had to leave about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And so we are up bright and early. The hotel provided us with a breakfast to take with us so we could have that at the airport. And we were advised by everyone that when we get to the airport and go through security, if they say, "Where have you been?" you don't say, "Oh, I've been in Bethlehem," or "I've been in Palestinian Authority territory." You just say, "Well, we've been visiting." "And where did you get your lunch?" "Oh, the hotel gave it to us." Well, that's a true story. The hotel in Bethlehem gave it to us. However, there was a little bit of a problem. One of the items in the breakfast was a bottle of orange juice with Arabic on the side of the bottle of orange juice. Now mine was carefully hidden, so the security guards couldn't see it. One of the gentlemen with us, his bottle of orange juice was sort of sticking out a little bit, and it was quite obvious that the Israeli security people saw that and saw the Arabic and realized that you were probably in Palestinian territories. But they smiled and they let us go on through. Now I should add, as I said before, that we left the hotel to go to the airport at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And we're driving along, and all of a sudden we come on the road, we come to a great big wall. The road was blocked. Well, what happened was that I think it was the Israeli guard, it was the Israeli guards on that hotel. They opened the wall, as it were. So the wall just opened up and we could carry on in the bus. However, before that, they decided to come on board the bus and check our passports. And the first one that they checked was, guess who? Dale. They looked at that, and they looked at her, and then they decided that they'd had enough. They didn't need to check everyone else, that she passed muster, and so we were able to carry on. So we had some interesting experiences, what it boiled down to. All right, that concludes what I'm going to tell you about our experiences, 2 sessions now in Israel and Palestine. And the next time we do a presentation, and hopefully we'll have less technical difficulties next time, we're gonna go to Iceland, spend a little time in Iceland, tour around different areas of Iceland. And at the end of it, we're going to go to Greenland. Now, Greenland and Greenland in particular, and Iceland to some extent, have been very much in the news over the last few months, the last couple of years. And I'm not going to get into that part. I'm just going to tell you the experiences we had as tourists in Iceland and also in Greenland. I think we had about 5 days in Greenland. It was 2 days at one location and 3 days at another location. And we had about 2 weeks in Iceland, as I recall correctly. All right, I'm sorry about the early technical difficulties, which that happens. You just have to deal with it.
You did a very good job of getting us back
Well,
up.
yeah, without Kayla, we wouldn't have had a presentation. So thank you for coming. I hope it was worth your while. And we look forward to seeing you next time, a couple of months from now. And as I said, we'll talk about Iceland and we'll talk about Greenland a little bit. So if anyone has any queries, any questions, any clarifications, any corrections, any things I misspoke, please let me know. But thank you for coming. Any questions? John? No? Okay, thank you. See you next time.